The bodies of 6 foreign aid workers killed after a food delivery in Gaza Monday have been transported out via Egypt, despite Israel's apology and the promise of a thorough and independent investigation. There's no let-up in the international condemnation, including from some of Israel's closest allies. Karis Garland has more.
Describing them as 7 beautiful souls, World Central Kitchen paid tribute on social media to its workers killed in Gaza. 3 British citizens, Polish and Australian nationals, a Canadian-American dual national and a Palestinian died when Israeli airstrikes hit their convoy on Monday night. Among them was Zomi Frankom. Her friends have remembered her infectious smile and sense of humanity.
She makes you feel like you're the only person in a room. And so as a plate of food went from service provider to service recipient, that could be a very cold exchange if it's just a plate of food. But Zomi would produce that in a way that made you know that there was a connection.
World Central Kitchen said it had coordinated its movement with the army, but its team was targeted while travelling in a deconflicted zone in cars branded with the charity's logo. The Israeli military issued its mea culpa and apologized for the deaths. It says it's launching an independent investigation to be carried out in the coming days.
The strike was not carried out with the intention of harming WCK aid workers. It was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night during a war in a very complex conditions. It shouldn't have happened.
The strikes have drawn condemnation from world leaders, including from the American president. Joe Biden said he was outraged and heartbroken, adding that Israel had not been doing enough to protect aid workers. The deaths have prompted World Central Kitchen and other aid organizations to suspend operations in Gaza. It comes as the US and other countries are setting up a maritime aid corridor from Cyprus to get around restrictions on deliveries by road. On Tuesday, Cyprus said one ship was returning to the Mediterranean island with around 240 tons of aid that had not been unloaded.
For more, we turn first to France 24's Lila Jacinto. Lila, what more do we know about what exactly transpired on Monday?
I mean, a lot of questions being asked, and we heard the Israeli military chief there in a very preliminary response saying that it was a misidentification that happened with the killings. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday said that it was they were unidentified and airstrikes. I mean, clearly at the heart of this is clearly a collapse of command and control. And some of these questions have actually been addressed by a joint investigative report by the Israeli-Palestinian news site Plus 972 with a Hebrew language local call. And this investigative report, which is based on speaking to many Israeli military intelligence officials, the findings were shared with the British daily The Guardian. Basically, what this report looks at is the Israeli military's use of artificial intelligence, AI, to generate targets. The Israeli system is called Lavender, and at its height, apparently, after the October 7th attacks, Lavender generated 37,000 Palestinian men identified as either Hamas or PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives. And one of the people there said, yes, this is 37,000, but it depends on how you set the bar for how you define a Hamas or a PIJ operative. And the Israeli left-leaning daily Haaretz has another report where it talks about kill zones, and they have quoted Israeli reservists as saying, basically, the military right now is defining anyone who it kills as a terrorist, any Palestinian adult male who walks into these zones that are called kill zones that the Israeli military has identified, but which Palestinians are not made aware of, which are not clearly marked. Now, the IDF, of course, denies these claims. It denies that, that it's using excessive force. Proportionality is the heart of it. And it's also the question of collateral damage, because what is happening with these AI-generated names and targets, if they are identified as low-level operatives, then the military is using dumb bombs, not smart bombs, which increases the collateral damage. Now, if you take the example of the aid workers who were killed, there were 7 of them. There were 3 strikes. assuming, which is not the case, of course, that there was a Hamas operative in the car, unbeknownst to them, which is absolutely not the case, does that justify taking out 7 other civilians? So, so this is all really undermining the credibility of the IDF figures and what the IDF is saying. Because among other things, in 6 months now, this war that has entered, the IDF says it has killed 13,000 Hamas or PIJ operatives. Now, health officials in Gaza, in the Hamas-run Gaza, says that the 33,000 death tolls does not include 13,000 adult males. They have consistently said that most of the casualties are women and children. For the world watching this, one is the credibility of the Israeli military, which is coming down. 2, the world is also watching the outcry with leaders like Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, and the media coverage that this is getting. They are clearly seeing images of those 3 passports, the EU, British, Australian passport, that is generating this outcry, that is making demands for accountability, and asking themselves, what about the nearly 200 Palestinian aid workers who have been killed in the 6 months? And this is really regenerating this narrative, which is so profound in this during this conflict, of the double standards and the lack of accountability that some have and others don't.
All right, for more, let's go to Tel Aviv. His columns appear in Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz that Lila mentioned. Retired Ambassador Alon Pinkas, thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Always, Francois. Good to be with you.
There have been critical voices I read in the Israeli press this Wednesday, some saying that there's too much of a shoot-first culture, and that this was flagged months back when you had those 3 escaped Israeli hostages who were killed by friendly fire.
Yeah, and there was also the incident in which over 100 Palestinians seeking food were stampeded, and then some were shot, and this. This gains a lot of media attention. The Kitchen Central tragedy, but there have been other incidents, and some of these criticisms are absolutely right. Look, we can go into the details of what exactly happened there, and I'm sure that was, as was said a moment ago, this was a collapse of the command and control structure. And definitely orders did not permeate, did not trickle down from the upper echelons down to the field. However, all that said and established, this is unfathomable. This is unacceptable, because there's a simple logic here. This is northern Gaza. It's northwestern Gaza on the beach. Israel knows that the World Central Kitchen is working there. Their cars are identified, and the times in which they offload food supplies and then start the distribution process are also known to the IDF. In fact, they are coordinated with the IDF. So why, for the love of God, why would you even engage in a military activity at that time in that place, knowing who is there? That's no inquiry commission can answer that.
And we had the reaction of the Prime Minister on Tuesday. Let's listen to Benjamin Netanyahu's statement.
Unfortunately, in the last day, there was a tragic case of our forces unintentionally hitting innocent people in the Gaza Strip. It happens in war. We will investigate it right to the end. We are in contact with the governments, and we will do everything so that this thing does not happen again.
Alon Pinkas, those words shocking some people, saying it's things, basically saying that things happen in war, was not very sensitive.
I agree. What can I tell you, Francois? I mean, he had to say this, so he went on and said it. It's as if he said, okay, I take responsibility, mea culpa, now let's move on. I didn't mean to do this. No one meant to do this. This was not intentional. This was not deliberate. So let's move on. It's war. Things happen in war. Strange things hit a big fan, and stuff happens. That's a hollow excuse, because I go back to what I told you a moment ago, Francois. There was absolutely no reason to operate militarily at that place at that time, knowing what was being conducted there, the humanitarian aid offloading and distribution. So what he was saying is basically, yeah, I know, I recognize the criticism. I got these nasty remarks from the American administration. I got nasty remarks from all over the world. So I'll just take responsibility, which he hasn't done about anything until now, and let's move on. Nothing to see here. It's again, no one meant for this to happen. I'm absolutely confident and certain that no one in the IDF did this purposely. It would be insanity to even contemplate that. But that it did happen tells you something.
I was going to ask you next if it's going to move the dial, but it appears it already has in the last minutes. Israeli War Cabinet member, head of the opposition, Benny Gantz, has called for September snap elections. Well, I guess, will those happen, first of all? And what's your reaction to him making that statement?
Well, it's a very welcome statement, given that he's been under tremendous pressure from his side of the political map, from the 50+% of Israelis who dislike this government and want an immediate election. That's actually closer to 65%. And he has wavered and equivocated and hesitated and vacillated, all these beautiful words, for a very long time, and then finally said today, let's do this in September. I have to tell you, I don't want to sound greedy. September is too far. An election should have been held by June. June is now too soon because it takes 90 days for the Knesset, the parliament, to dissolve itself. Now, you asked a great question, Francois. Will this happen? You need a majority in the Knesset of 61 out of 120 seats. The coalition now has 64, meaning that you need at least 5 so-called defectors from the coalition, or conversely, a consensus, a decision by mutual consent to hold an election in September. I think what Mr. Netanyahu is going to do is prolong the process. He's going to haggle. He's going to, pull all the spins and all the manipulations that he's very well capable of pulling. Try to move this toward the summer, meaning that election will not, in his mind, an election will not be held until early 2025. Now, if you ask me, and I'm speculating here, Francois, for the sake of your show, the public outcry is going to be huge. And I think the pressure is going to be immense. And that is why I do think, cautiously, that there will be an election around September, maybe October. Those are the Jewish high holidays, so September looks like a perfect date.
And we're waiting a 4th straight night of protests against the Prime Minister. They got a little violent on Tuesday evening. We're talking about rising pressure, but could Benny Gantz quit now the unity government, now that he's made this statement?
Well, he should. He's under pressure to do so because he joined the War Cabinet, not exactly the government, but the War Cabinet, to contribute from his experience and seasoned career as an IDF chief of the general staff. But the war de facto ended. His impact on decisions is minimal. He bears responsibility for every decision that the government is making, meaning he's providing a shield, a protective shield from Mr. Netanyahu's antics and manipulation. So it's about time that he leave. But in your question lies a much bigger political possibility or eventuality. The moment Mr. Gantz and his partner, Gadi Eisenkot, who is also a retired former IDF chief of staff, the moment they leave the government, I think you will see an intensification of the public demonstrations and protests. Right now, there's this Israeli mindset. The majority of the people are saying, this is not the right time. We hate this government. We detest what they've done. We're angry. We're devastated. However, at a wartime, during a war, my kid, my cousin, my neighbor, my father, they're all in the army. they're all fighting, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not the time to protest. Once they leave the government, I think you will see a major increase in the level and intensity of these demonstrations.
Alon Pinkas, many thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.